Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I'm going to be doing my review of the 2024 Las Vegas Grand Prix. So pretty interesting Grand Prix, overtaking here and there, not a whole lot of drama, not a whole lot of crashes. Actually, I don't think we had a single yellow flag. I think there was quite a bit of intrigue going into the race about how things would go with race pace, as there was some discussion that things would be quite different from qualifying, but turns out not really the case. And of course, the other big talking point going into the race was about the World Drivers' Championship. Would Max Verstappen win his fourth straight World Drivers' Championship, or would Norris find a way to keep the fight going into the penultimate round of the season in Qatar? And it turns out he wouldn't. We would have there would be a fourth straight World Championship for Max Verstappen. So doing things a little bit differently today, just trying things out, seeing how things are received. But your race winner for the 2024 Las Vegas Grand Prix is none other than pole sitter George Russell. Bit of redemption for him after being disqualified from the win at the Belgian Grand Prix. And again, like it would have been without Russell's disqualification in Belgium, it is another 1-2 for the Mercedes team, with Hamilton having a pretty good recovery drive to finish in P2. Third, Carlos Sainz rounding out the podium with his teammate Charles Leclerc in fourth. Bit of a disappointing result for Ferrari, I think, given the expectations coming into this weekend, given that they generally were seen by many as the favorites for this Grand Prix. Fifth, your world champion Max Verstappen did what he had to, stayed ahead of Lando Norris, and was able to again win that world championship. Sixth and seventh, your two McLarens, Norris ahead of Piastri. Norris does get that extra point for fastest lap, pitting, I think, on the penultimate lap and getting that fastest lap on the final lap of the race. Eighth, Nico Hulkenberg. Ninth, Yuki Tsunoda. Seems like they've generally been the two best drivers from the midfield last, since the second half of the season began. And again, another really good result for the pair of them today. 10, Sergio Perez. A bit of a recovery from 15th on the grid. Not a great result all in all, though. I think a bit more would have been expected, especially finishing ahead of the Haas and ahead of the junior team in RB. 11th, Alonso. 12th, Magnussen. 13th, Show. 14th, Pinto. 15th, Stroll. 16th, Lawson. 17th, Ocon. 18th, Bottas. And your two DNFs were Albon and Gasly. Just taking a look at your Drivers' Championship before I kind of just have a bit of a ramble about my thoughts on the race in general. Let's see if we can get this right. Oh, there we go. You can even see my cursor as well. All right, so Max Verstappen again, now confirmed as world champion. 403 points. Second, Lando Norris with 340. Third, Charles Leclerc, 319. Fourth, Oscar Piastri, 263. Fifth, Carlos Sainz, 259. Honestly, not that far behind him. So again, that's going to be a battle to watch in the last two races of the season. Sixth, George Russell, 217. Seventh, Lewis Hamilton, 208. Eighth, Sergio Perez on 152 points. Now again, another weekend where he only gets 1 point. And then ninth is Alonso on 60, 62. And 10th is Nico Hulkenberg on 35, followed by Yuki Tsunoda in 11th on 30 points. 12th, Gasly. 13th, Stroll. 14th, Ocon. 15th, Magnussen. 16th, Albon. 17th, Ricciardo. 18th, Behrman. 19th, Pinto. 20th, Lawson. 22nd, Sargent. And 23rd, Bottas. No points for any of them. And they all stay in their position. So again, no changes in any of the Drivers' Championship positions today, but there was a change in the Manufacturers' Championship. So McLaren still on top. They did lose points to Ferrari today in that Constructors' Championship, but I think at the same point it's still, I think, McLaren, especially given that they should be the favorites at the last two tracks in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. I do think they'll be the favorites for the Constructors' title at this point in the season. Second, Ferrari, though, 584 points. McLaren, yes, again, I think I forgot to mention 608 points for them. Third, Red Bull, 555. Fourth, Mercedes, 425. So again, they're unfortunately for them still miles off the Red Bull, but if, let's say, they had 100 more points than they do now, things I think could be pretty interesting in those final two races, and they maybe could have had a chance of pipping Red Bull to third. Fifth, Aston Martin, 86 points. They've basically been in no man's land all year, and the one change in the Constructors' Championship is Haas now moves back ahead of Alpine 46. They are now sitting on 50, whereas Alpine on 59th. And that DNF for Gasly is going to be a big what if for Alpine in terms of potential results and a potential another point score for them in the Constructors' Championship. 8th RB, they do gain some points with Tsunoda now sitting on 46, and then you have Williams 9th on 17, and Sauber in 10th on 0 points. So my thoughts on the Grand Prix, thought overall it was okay, definitely not as good as last year's race. We did have a couple of decent battles through the field, but that being said, it did feel a little bit predictable here and there. A lot of DRS overtakes going into turn 14. And I thought, overall, it was, I think, one of the things the big takeaways I feel from, especially free practice and from qualifying, not necessarily the race itself, but it does feel like the atmosphere is generally, there was a bit of a drop compared to last year's race. I think, some of the hype and the sheen kind of has worn off from the initial year. The fact that one, it's so late at night, and two, it's pretty cold there. It's generally been hovering around 10, 15 degrees for the entire race weekend. I think just means that it's not a super attractive option to sit outside on some cold steel bleachers in those kinds of temperatures. So I do wonder, long term what they decide to do with this. I know there's a whole bunch of, contracts, and there's reason that Las Vegas is on this specific weekend, given that it's a weekend before American Thanksgiving. But, I do think this is a race that would probably be a bit better suited to being, at a slightly warmer time of year. So again, that's something that's, a more long-term thing. For my thoughts on the race as a whole, I think let's go team by team. So I think for your race winners, for your Mercedes, I think overall they had, an absolutely perfect weekend. I think this is really the best they could have hoped. And I think it generally puts more, gives more evidence to and more credence to the theory that for whatever reason, Mercedes generally do much better in cold temperatures, and they just kind of suck everywhere else. So again, and for Mercedes, they generally don't know why that's the case. And that's something I really think they need to get on top of if they want to have any chance of doing well next year in 2025, but also in 2026. Because even though it is new regulations, again, it is primarily new engine regulations. The new cars 2026 will still be using the ground effects rules, which is something that they've definitely I feel have struggled with. For Russell, I thought he did a really good job, really controlled the pace of the race. And just kind of led. I know Hamilton was gaining on him for most of the race, but I did feel like he knew that he had a lot of time in hand, track position in hand as well. And so we just kind of let Hamilton get within 5 seconds, and then from there he just kind of controlled the gap. So really good drive from Hamilton, decent race as well good race for Russell, decent race as well for Hamilton. Qualifying yesterday is obviously a big what if for him. If he had been able to let's say qualify top 3, perhaps he's in the picture for the race win, and things are a lot more competitive between himself and Russell. But again, made those 2 big mistakes in Q3, so that definitely hurt him for the race. For Ferrari, I think for Sainz, decent race, lost positions at the start, and didn't have the best strategy, especially with the second pit stop, where he clearly wanted to pit, the tires were clearly done, and unfortunately stayed out, I think, a lap or two too late. And I think that really hurt him and basically removed any chance of him fighting for second place. But other than that, I thought really good weekend for Sainz. Generally stayed ahead of his teammate Leclerc and was the better Ferrari driver today. For Leclerc, I thought decent, but again, not quite on the same level of his teammate. Let's see, next best team, I think you're looking at your Red Bull. For Verstappen, I thought really good race. I thought the first stint of the race had very, very good pace. At points looked like he might have been able to challenge Russell for the win. The Red Bull seemed to have much better pace on the medium tires than they did on the hards. So again, that's something that's a bit curious. But I thought for the first stint of the race, I thought, again, might have had a shot at the win, but I think once they got on the hard tires after that first pit stop, I think the pace was just not really there. They were clearly slower, and he was clearly slower than the Mercedes and slower than the Ferraris as well. So again, I think especially after the struggles with their rear wing during free practice, I think Verstappen will be pretty happy with a P5 and a 4th World Championship. For McLaren, I think arguably one of the biggest disappointments for the weekend. finishing sixth and seventh. I think realistically they should have been ahead of Verstappen, especially given all the struggles that Verstappen and Red Bull had during the weekend. But that being said, I think sixth and seventh isn't the end of the world. It is clear that for whatever reason, Mercedes were just very, very fast here, much better than anyone really expected. And I think most people expected them to be behind Ferrari. So I don't think those two things. I think those two things are a bit of a surprise, but that are to be expected. But that being said, I do think being behind Verstappen is a little bit of a surprise. Speaking of Red Bull, I did forget to mention Verstappen's teammate Max Verstappen. Not a great race from Paris, to be sure. Qualifying again, another big setback there, and okay pace in the race. Generally, has done what he's done for most of his recovery drives this year, where he basically just stays out on track a little bit longer than his direct competitors around him, and uses that, and then basically just uses the overcut to get past those teammates and uses the pace on those fresh tires to get past his direct rivals. So was able to get up to 10th, but again, really should have been 8th, I felt. Let's see, next best team would be Haas. So for Haas, Hulkenberg in 8th. I thought really good pace for him. Magnussen, again, decent race as well, but not quite on the same level as his teammate Hulkenberg. For Haas, they had a bit of an interesting race, a bit of an interesting strategy with the pits, their pit stops. They went, I think, 2 to 3 laps longer than everyone else. So when they came out from their pit stops, they were obviously a bit out of position compared to where they went in before the pit cycle. But that being said, they had pretty strong pace during their stints, and because this is a track where you can overtake, they were able to get past. So pretty good race for Haas. And again, another 4 points in the bags. And like I said before, they get past Alpine in the Constructors' Championship. So that'll be most important for them. For RB, bit of a race of two halves, I guess, in terms of one driver I thought had a really good race in Tsunoda. Again, did lose a couple positions compared to where he qualified, but at the same time, I thought generally made the most of the car. And I think, especially given how bad RB were here last year, of course, as AlphaTauri, I think they'll be decently happy with another 2 points in the bag. And again, it means that they're still within striking distance of getting past Alpine going into the last two races. For Lawson, not a great race. I thought the race pace wasn't so strong. And of course, he had a bit of a mistake, a bit of a really scruffy Q2, which made him start 15th. Of course, promoted to 14th with Colapinto starting from the pit lane. But that being said, I felt for Lawson, the race pace not super strong. I think RB left him out quite too long. The second pit stop as well, so that definitely hurt him there. And yeah, so I think again a bit of a team mistake. Although that being said, it was pretty clear I think for me that RB was really banking on a safety car coming out, and then that of course would have fixed things. Given that Lawson likely wasn't going to score points even if they had gone with the optimal strategy. Next up, Aston Martin, Alonso, I think an inspired strategy, a bit of an interesting one, pitted very, very early, pitted in the opening 10 laps, and then got track position on everyone else basically after that first pit stop in clean air, which I think honestly was a pretty decent strategy, as long as he could make the tires work. Not quite able to get a point, but an 11th place I think is pretty good, considering where they were in qualifying and in practice. For Stroll, not a great race, pretty anonymous, starting from the back, made up a couple positions, but again, kind of in no man's land in the lower midfield for most of the race. Let's see, moving down to Zhou and Sauber. For Zhou, I think really did the best he could. At points during the Grand Prix, he was, on the cusp of getting some points, in 9th place, 10th place, but unfortunately for him, the pace wasn't quite there. And just unable to get points and finishing in 13th, I believe. For Bottas, really anonymous race, last classified finisher, and yeah, not a great race for him. For Williams, Colapinto, I think okay race. Of course, probably was giving a little bit of a gap, not pushing too hard after the big crash I had yesterday, and of course the crashes I had in Brazil. But that being said, I think 14th is okay. Really unfortunate for Albon. He looked like he could have been able to score points today. Pretty smart first pit stop, and then was running in the points and unfortunately forced to pit. But I'm not really surprised given that their car is basically pieced together with hopes and dreams and not a whole lot else. And then I think last team to really talk about is Alpine. Really unfortunate result today. Gasly with that mega effort in qualifying P3. Really, I think at worst they should have been aiming for a P8. But unfortunately, some kind of mechanical issue on the car forced Gasly to retire pretty early in the Grand Prix. For Ocon, he did like an extra pit stop for some reason. Don't know exactly why that was the case, but really rough Grand Prix for him. With that extra pit stop, kind of ruined any chance of again getting points for him. I think the only thing that I've got on the top of my head that I forgot to mention before was, of course, Piastri got a 5-second penalty for a false start. He was quite far out of position, which is again not great for him. A bit of a clumsy error on his part. Had to make a bit of a recovery after the first pit stop, but again, the McLaren had enough pace so you could just kind of get past all of the midfield runners. So there you go. There's my thoughts, my kind of a review. A lot less, blow for blow for what I usually do. But if this does well, maybe I'll stick with this. Doesn't do so well, maybe I'll go back to the blow by blow kind of lap by lap kind of more detailed notes, and of course using notes to make sure I know, can tell exactly what happened. But that being said, I think most people watched the same Grand Prix as I did, so more I think giving my thoughts and just general opinion I think maybe is a bit of a better way to go. We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. That's my review of the 2024 Las Vegas Grand Prix. I'll be back tomorrow with my power rankings. Again, I've given a lot of my thoughts already, so maybe the power rankings will go a little bit more quickly. It'll just be me talking about where drivers qualified, how they finished, how they did compared to their teammate, and just giving positions that way. So again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.